Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin the hidden force within. Have you ever felt a weight pressing on your chest? It's an invisible pressure that you cannot name but always sense. Life appears normal on the surface. You work, you smile, you go through your routines, but something underneath refuses to let you rest. It is not simply stress or exhaustion. It is a deeper pull, like an anchor dragging you back into waters you thought you had already crossed. Think of the last time you promised yourself that things would change, that you would quit procrastinating, take risks, love more honestly, or finally silence the doubts in your head. And yet, just as progress appeared within reach, a voice inside whispered, "Stop. Don't try. You'll fail. You're not enough." The momentum collapsed, leaving you staring at yourself with the same old frustration. Why does this happen? Why do we seem to be our own greatest enemy at the very moment we are closest to victory? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, offered an answer. There is a force inside us, hidden but powerful, shaping our actions, reactions, and even our fate. He called it the shadow. This shadow is not a metaphorical ghost or a superstition. It is a psychological truth, the collection of everything we bury in ourselves, the parts of us we are ashamed of, the emotions we were told were unacceptable, the desires we pretended not to have, the weaknesses we tried to hide. You might believe that by ignoring these elements, by locking them away in the basement of your mind, they vanish. But the truth is far more disturbing. What is ignored does not die. What is repressed does not disappear. Instead, it waits in silence, gaining strength, influencing your decisions in ways you never recognize. Imagine for a moment that your life is a stage play. You stand beneath the spotlight, dressed in the role you've chosen, successful, kind, disciplined, calm, or whatever mask society rewards. But behind the curtain lurks another character, envious, insecure, passionate, wild. This character whispers lines into your ear, tugs at the strings of your behavior, and sometimes storms onto the stage uninvited. And when it does, you say things you regret, destroy relationships you care about, or sabotage opportunities you worked so hard to create. Afterwards, you wonder, why did I do that? That wasn't me. But it was you. It was the shadow. The shadow emerges in the strangest ways. It's the sudden rage you feel at a minor inconvenience and emotion, so explosive that it shocks even you. It's the bitterness that gnaws at your heart when you see someone achieving what you secretly crave. It's the paralyzing fear of failure that makes you abandon projects halfway, convinced that excuses are safer than risk. It's the hollow echo of shame telling you that no matter what you do, you will never truly be enough. We often believe these are random flaws in our personality, accidents of fate, or proof that we are broken. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What you think is destiny may simply be the shadow pulling invisible strings. The frightening truth is that the shadow knows you better than you know yourself. It remembers every moment you were humiliated, every desire you smothered, every time you silenced your own truth to please others. Each of those moments left a scar, and those scars did not vanish. They sank into the unconscious, where they now live like ghosts haunting your choices. And because you never face them, they repeat again and again. Think of the cycles you've lived through. Toxic relationships that look different but feel the same. Failures that strike just before success. Arguments that always follow the same script. Each time you promise yourself this won't happen again. Yet it does. That is the shadow's design. It thrives in patterns. But perhaps the most dangerous quality of the shadow is its invisibility. It does not shout. It does not reveal itself openly. Instead, it manipulates silently. You convince yourself that you are choosing freely, but in truth, you are guided by wounds you never healed and emotions you never accepted. You blame others, blame circumstances, blame luck, but deep down, the enemy is within. Consider how many times you've judged others with intensity that surprised you. A co-worker's arrogance infuriates you. A friend's hunger for recognition disgusts you. Someone's confidence makes you roll your eyes. Often, these judgments are not about them. They are projections of your own denied qualities. You resent in others what you repress in yourself. Your shadow sees itself reflected in the world, and you attack the mirror instead of facing your own reflection. And so the cycle continues. Judgment, sabotage, fear, envy, shame. Each one is a thread woven by the shadow, binding you into patterns you cannot escape, unless you have the courage to turn toward it. Most people never will. They will live their lives blaming the external world for their inner chaos. Okay? They will say, it's just bad luck. It's just who I am. Okay, it's just fate. And in doing so, they surrender the stage of their lives to the shadow, letting it write the script while they merely play the role. But for those who dare to look inward, the story changes. Because within the shadow lies not only pain and darkness, but also power. The energy you use to repress anger can become strength. The desire you buried can fuel creativity. The shame you carried can turn into compassion. The shadow is not just a prison, it is also a reservoir. But to access it, you must first face it. This is the beginning of the journey. It is not comfortable. To confront the shadow is to tear away the mask and admit truths about yourself you have long denied. It is to acknowledge that much of what happens in your life is not chance, but self-sabotage. It is to accept that the enemy is not outside, but within. And yet, it is also the only path to liberation. So I ask you now, are you ready? Ready to peer behind the curtain, to face the character you've hidden, to take back the strings of your life? Because if you are, then the shadow, your greatest enemy, can become your greatest teacher. And this first step, this moment of awareness, is where true transformation begins. The making of the shadow, from the moment you opened your eyes to the world, you were being shaped. Before you could walk or speak, rules and expectations wrapped around you like invisible threads. Be a good boy. Don't cry. Smile for the camera. Stop being difficult. At first, you didn't question these instructions, you absorbed them. Childhood is not a democracy. It is a theater where adults write the script, and children, eager to be loved, learn their roles. But here is the hidden cost. Every time you followed those rules, every time you suppressed what you truly felt in order to be accepted, a piece of you was pushed into the shadows. Think back. Perhaps you were a child who wanted to scream when someone took your toy, but you were told, "Don't be angry. That's not nice." Perhaps you wanted to cry when you were hurt, but the words came, "Stop crying. Be strong." Maybe you wanted to say no, to resist, to assert yourself, but the message was clear. Don't be selfish. Share. Be polite. Be quiet. So you learned that some emotions were dangerous. That anger made you unlovable. That sadness made you weak. That wanting too much was arrogance. That standing up for yourself would bring rejection. Slowly, without even realizing it, you built a mask, the acceptable self. And behind that mask, piece by piece, the unwanted parts of you were exiled into the unconscious. Carl Jung named this hidden reservoir the shadow. It is not an abstract idea or a philosophical metaphor. It is alive inside you right now. It is the vault where you locked your anger, your fear, your wildness, your ambition, your shame, your forbidden desires. But here's the truth. Most people never face what is buried does not vanish. It waits. Imagine your mind as an iceberg. The tip above the water is what the world sees: your smile, your job, your achievements, your manners. But beneath the surface lies the massive structure of who you really are. Invisible to others, and often invisible even to you. The shadow lives there in the deep, unseen foundations of your psyche. And though hidden, it is far from powerless. Every time you feel an irrational discomfort in the presence of someone confident, it may be because you buried your own desire for confidence. Every time you judge someone for seeking recognition, it may be because you silenced your own hunger to be seen. Every time you envy another's success, it may be because you once wanted the same but learned to call that desire selfish or impossible. The shadow is not silent. It speaks in symptoms: anxiety, depression, repetition of the same toxic relationships, addictions that numb the pain of what you refuse to face, procrastination that protects you from the terror of failure. And in every case, you don't recognize that the enemy you fight is not outside, it is the part of yourself you locked away. Think of it like this. You are carrying a heavy suitcase through life. Inside it are all the parts you swore you didn't need. You drag it from job to job, relationship to relationship, telling yourself it's empty, that you left those things behind. But the suitcase rattles. Its contents shift. and at unexpected times, the lock snaps open, spilling anger, jealousy, fear, or shame across the floor of your life. The making of the shadow is inevitable. No one escapes it. Society demands conformity. Parents demand obedience. Peers demand masks. To survive, we all repress. We all push down what doesn't fit. But ignoring the shadow doesn't neutralize it. Cues, what you exile becomes stronger in exile. What you deny grows teeth in the dark. This is why cycles repeat. Why a man who was told never to show vulnerability grows up emotionally numb, then wonders why his relationships fail. Why a woman who was taught to hide her ambition becomes bitter when others achieve what she secretly longed for. Why someone who learned to bury their anger finds it erupting uncontrollably in moments that don't warrant it. The shadow has many disguises. Sometimes it appears as envy, eating you alive while you pretend to clap for others. Sometimes it shows up as fear, fear so paralyzing that you find reasons to never start, never risk, never change. Sometimes it wears the mask of judgment, making you lash out at people who embody what you deny in yourself. The more you repress, the more destructive the shadow becomes. Like pressure building inside a sealed chamber, it waits for cracks. When the cracks appear, an argument with a partner, a failure at work, a betrayal, it rushes out with explosive force. That is why people sometimes destroy everything they love in a single outburst, then collapse in regret. The shadow had been waiting for its moment. But perhaps the most insidious way the shadow operates is quietly. Not through explosions, but through subtle sabotage. You plan to study, but somehow end up scrolling your phone. You set goals, but abandon them halfway. You desire love, but push people away when they get too close. The shadow does not shout, it whispers. It convinces you to stay in your comfort zone, even if that comfort is misery. So what exactly makes the shadow so powerful? The answer is simple. You don't believe it exists. You think you are fully in control, when in reality, large parts of you remain unconscious. You believe you are rational, when in truth, you are being steered by wounds you don't even remember. You believe your judgments about others are accurate, when in truth, they are projections of your own denied self. The making of the shadow is a tragedy, but it is also an opportunity. Because while the shadow contains your deepest pain, it also holds your deepest potential. Watch you. Within the anger you repressed lies your capacity for strength. Within the envy you denied lies your ambition. Within the fear you buried lies your courage. But to reach these treasures, you must first face the darkness. You must admit that the parts you locked away are still alive, still waiting. You must look into the mirror without filters, without masks, and say, yes, this too is me. The making of the shadow is not the end of the story, is the beginning. Because once you recognize how it was created, you can begin to unmake its chains. You can begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that you abandoned. The question is, are you willing? Are you willing to open the suitcase, to face the anger, the envy, the shame, the fear? Or will you, like most, continue to pretend that the shadow does not exist while it silently scripts the story of your life? This is the crossroads. On one path lies denial, repression, and endless repetition. On the other lies confrontation, courage, and ultimately liberation. And so, the shadow waits. The shadow at work. The shadow does not wait quietly in some forgotten corner of your psyche. It works, patiently, silently, relentlessly, like a ghost that cannot rest. It weaves itself into your daily life, to the choices you make, the relationships you form, and the paths you abandon. And the most dangerous part is this: you rarely notice. You believe you are acting freely, but in reality, the shadow is pulling strings behind the curtain. Think about the moments you've looked back on your behavior and wondered, I do that. That wasn't me. You said something cruel you didn't mean. You destroyed an opportunity you had long desired. You pushed someone away who wanted to love you. You convinced yourself that you weren't good enough, even when everything pointed to the opposite. These are not accidents. They are patterns. And patterns are the language of the shadow. Projection. Seeing yourself in others, one of the shadow's most powerful tools is projection. Projection is when you cast onto others the qualities you cannot accept in yourself. If you were taught that ambition is selfish, you may feel contempt for people who chase success. If you buried your anger, you may dislike those who are assertive and outspoken. If you repressed your desire for recognition, you may despise people who enjoy the spotlight. Projection feels real. The emotion is raw and intense. You are convinced the problem lies in them, that they are arrogant, greedy, or intolerable. Jung warned that often what irritates you most in others is what you secretly hide within yourself. The mirror is too sharp, so instead of facing it, you attack the reflection. This explains why some people seem to trigger you more than others. It's not about them, it's about you. They are carrying the qualities your shadow holds hostage. And when they display those traits openly, your shadow protests, not against them, but against your own denial. Self-sabotage. The invisible handbrake. Another way the shadow works is through self-sabotage. You dream of success, but procrastinate until deadlines pass. You want love, but pick partners who wound you. You crave change, but retreat to old habits at the first sign of discomfort. Why? Because deep inside your shadow are beliefs you absorbed. Long ago beliefs that whisper, you don't deserve happiness. You don't deserve love. Success will only expose you. Failure is safer. So just when you are about to break free, the shadow pulls you back. You sabotage yourself unconsciously, creating obstacles, inventing excuses, quitting just before the breakthrough. The shadow convinces you that you are unlucky, that circumstances are against you, that the world is unfair. But the truth is simpler and harder. You are afraid. Afraid of what success would demand. Afraid of being seen. afraid of changing the identity you've carried for years. The shadow would rather you stay in misery because misery is familiar. And the familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. Patterns in relationships. The shadow's playground. Nowhere does the shadow work harder than in your relationships. Consider how often people fall into the same toxic dynamics again and again. Different partners, same story. Different friendships, same betrayal. Different jobs, same conflicts. This is no coincidence. It is repetition. And repetition is the shadow's way of keeping old wounds alive. If your shadow carries rejection, you will unconsciously be drawn to people who reject you. If it carries insecurity, you will choose people who make you feel small. If it carries anger, you may be drawn to those who provoke or mistreat you. It sounds cruel, but the shadow is not trying to destroy you, it is trying to be seen. It recreates the pain you buried so that you might finally face it. But because most people don't understand this, they remain trapped in cycles of hurt, believing they are cursed or unlucky, when in truth, they are haunted by their own unconscious identity. Hijacked by the shadow, perhaps the most frightening way the shadow operates is when it takes over your sense of self. You begin to believe its whispers. This is just who I am. I've always been anxious. I've never been good enough. I don't deserve more. These statements feel like facts, but they are not truths. They are scars. They are stories written by experiences you never processed, repeated so often that they became identity. The shadow convinces you to shrink yourself, to hide your brilliance, to settle for less. You call it reality. In fact, it is conditioning. The tragedy is that many people never question it. They live entire lives under the weight of a story written by their shadow. They mistake wounds for personality. They believe chains are their natural state. The shadows, subtlety like villains in stories. The shadow does not announce itself with grand gestures. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Its power is in subtlety. It whispers through hesitation, that moment when you think, maybe I shouldn't try. It whispers through comparison, the envy that burns when you see someone succeed. It whispers through fear, the racing heart that convinces you to stay silent. It whispers through shame, the voice that says, you are not enough. And because it speaks in whispers, you mistake it for your own thoughts. You don't realize the shadow has infiltrated your mind, planting seeds of doubt, fear, and despair. The illusion of fate tongue's warning echoes again, until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. How many times have you said, this always happens to me? How many times have you felt doomed to repeat the same mistakes? How many times have you believed you were cursed or destined for failure? The truth is, it's not fate, not destiny. It's your shadow working invisibly, recreating the conditions you refuse to face, breaking the spell of the shadow. The good news is that awareness changes everything. Once you see how the shadow operates through projection, sabotage, repetition, and whispering lies, you can no longer be its puppet. You begin to catch yourself in the act. You notice the projection and ask, "What does this say about me?" You see the sabotage and pause before giving up. You recognize the pattern in relationships and realize this isn't fate. This is my shadow speaking. This recognition is not easy. It demands brutal honesty. It demands the courage to admit that many of the struggles you face are not accidents, but choices shaped by an unconscious force within you. But with honesty comes power. What was once invisible becomes visible. And what is visible can be changed. The shadow is not an enemy, is a teacher.
Okay.
But until you confront it, it will remain your master. And so the question arises, how do you recognize the signs? How do you know when the shadow, not you, is in control? That is where the journey now turns. The cost of denial. For a time, denial feels like safety. If you can push your anger far enough down, you can keep the peace. If you bury your envy, no one will notice your jealousy. If you swallow your sadness, you can keep up the mask of strength. Denial promises comfort. It whispers, ignore it, and it will go away. But the truth is merciless. The shadow you ignore does not disappear. It grows. Every moment you repress it, every time you silence it, you are feeding it. Like pressure. Building in a sealed chamber, the shadow accumulates strength in silence. And when it breaks free, the eruption is catastrophic. The boiling point? Think about the last time you exploded over something smaller, misplaced word. A minor mistake, an inconvenience. On the surface, it made no sense. Why so much anger for something so trivial? But that was not a single moment's reaction. It was months, years, even decades of repressed emotion bursting through the cracks. When you deny anger, it doesn't vanish. It simmers. And eventually, it boils over, often at the worst possible time.
Cause.
A careless remark from a loved one becomes the spark that ignites years of unspoken frustration. Delay at work becomes the trigger for suppressed resentment. The shadow, once ignored, returns with vengeance. Relationships are often the first to suffer. Words are spoken in fury that cannot be taken back. Friendships shatter. Families fracture. Partners lose trust. And afterward, you are left stunned. Asking yourself, why did I do that? But you know the answer. You did not deal with the shadow when it whispered. So now, it screams. Self-destruction in disguise. Anger is not the only repressed force. Denied desires twist themselves into self-destructive habits. A passion you buried may resurface as addiction, drinking too much, eating excessively, chasing highs that leave you empty. A longing for recognition may mutate into compulsive overwork or unhealthy comparison. What you bury does not stay pure. Desire, repressed, often seeks expression in distorted ways. The artist who denies their creativity becomes restless and bitter. Ada. The leader who represses ambition numbs themselves with distractions. Ada. The lover who hides passion feels hollow, chasing shallow connections without intimacy. The shadow doesn't care how it expresses itself. If it cannot come out through healthy acknowledgement, it will break out through destructive substitutes. The body keeps the score. Ignore the shadow long enough, and it may even carve its mark into your body. Anxiety attacks, chronic tension, headaches, stomach pain symptoms medicine cannot fully explain. Trauma buried in the unconscious often resurfaces as physical illness. Your body becomes the stage where your shadow plays out its drama. This is not imagination. Research shows that repressed emotions alter the nervous system, the immune response, even the way your brain processes pain. The shadow ignored does not remain psychological, cannot outrun it, because it lives in your very cells. Toxic attachments. Another cost of denial is the repetition of destructive relationships. If you refuse to face your fear of abandonment, you may cling desperately to toxic partners, tolerating mistreatment just to avoid being alone. If you deny your anger, you may attract people who exploit your patience, allowing them to control you. If you bury your insecurity, you may unconsciously choose people who magnify it, making you feel small. The shadow has one obsession: to be seen. And if you refuse to look inward, it will force you to look outward. It will recreate old wounds in your relationships again and again. Until you stop blaming others and recognize the truth, the wound is inside. The empty shelter haps the most. Painful consequence of denial is the emptiness that follows. Imagine amputating parts of yourself, anger, desire, ambition, passion, just to be accepted. For a while, you seem fine. You look stable, balanced, good. But deep down, you feel something missing. That emptiness creeps in late at night, when the distractions fade. It whispers that your life feels hollow, even when on the surface, everything looks fine. You have achievements, yet feel unfulfilled. You have relationships, yet feel alone. You follow the rules, yet something essential is absent. This emptiness is not random. 'Tis the absence of yourself, the parts you exiled to the shadow. You may not remember them, but you feel their absence every day. The shadow in control. The most dangerous outcome of denial is when the shadow stops being a hidden influence and becomes the dominant force. Have you ever met someone consumed by bitterness? Someone who cannot see joy, who interprets every event as an attack, who lives in constant resentment. These people were not born bitter. They spent years repressing, denying, and silencing their pain till the shadow grew so strong that it took control. Their personalities hardened around resentment. Their lives became loops of anger and blame. This is the ultimate cost of denial. To become a prisoner of the very forces you tried to escape. Losing yourself. Another devastating effect is depersonalization, feeling like a stranger in your own body. When you amputate parts of yourself, you cut away essential pieces of your identity. You try to be only the good version, the polished mask, but the mask is not you. Over time, you forget who you truly are. This loss of self creates confusion. You ask, why do I feel empty? Why can't I connect? Why doesn't success satisfy me? The answer is brutal, because you left parts of yourself behind. You cannot feel whole when you live as half. The breaking point. So what happens if you continue ignoring the shadow? Eventually, the breaking point comes. It may arrive as a midlife crisis, when decades of repression collapse under the weight of time. It may come as burnout, when the body refuses to carry the load anymore. It may come as sudden rage, addiction, or depression that swallows you whole. At the breaking point, the shadow no longer asks for attention, it demands it. And in that moment, you realize the cost of years spent in denial. The turning point yet. Even here, in the wreckage, there is opportunity. Because when denial finally fails, when the shadow forces itself into the light, you are given a choice: collapse into despair, or finally face what you have always avoided. The shadow is not your enemy, is your neglected ally. But if you treat it as an enemy, if you keep burying it, it will remain destructive. Only when you confront it with honesty does it reveal its gifts. The cost of denial is high relationships lost, health damage, dreams abandoned, identities hollowed. But the reward of awareness is even greater. For when you stop denying, when you face the shadow, you unlock power you never knew you had. You now stand at the edge of this truth. The shadow will not vanish. You must choose whether to remain its prisoner or transform it into an ally. The next step is crucial. How do you face the shadow consciously? How do you integrate it without letting it destroy you? That is where the journey turns next. Transformation through integration. Now that you have seen the cost of ignoring your shadow, the anger that erupts, the desires that twist into addictions, the emptiness that follows, you might feel the weight of despair. If the shadow is this powerful, if it infiltrates every choice and every relationship, is there any hope of escaping it? Yes. But the way forward is not what most people expect. You cannot kill the shadow. You cannot bury it deeper. You cannot run from it. The only way is to face it, to integrate it into the light of your consciousness. Carl Jung was clear. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your unacknowledged self. And if you have the courage to confront it, you will discover that what once enslaved you can become your greatest source of strength. Step 1. Recognition. Transformation begins with recognition. You cannot change what you refuse to see. This means paying attention to your emotional triggers, the moments when your reactions are exaggerated. When you feel hatred or envy or shame far stronger than the situation seems to warrant, ask yourself, why does this irritate me so much? What part of myself am I seeing reflected in them? What does this say about me? When you despise someone's arrogance, is it because they are truly unbearable? Because they mirror your own suppressed confidence? When you envy another's success, Is it because they have something you don't tore because you buried? Your own ambition long ago. Recognition is painful. It strips away excuses. But it is also liberating because the moment you see the shadow clearly, it loses some of its grip. Step 2. Allowing after recognition comes allowing. For years, you may have told yourself, I am not angry. I am not jealous. I am not afraid. But denial only makes the shadow stronger. Transformation requires that you allow yourself to feel what you have long repressed. This does not mean exploding in rage or drowning in despair. It means sitting with yourself and saying, yes, I feel this. I feel anger. I feel envy. I feel fear. And that's okay. By allowing the shadow's emotions to exist without shame, you begin to reclaim them as part of your humanity. Anger can become energy for justice. Fear can become caution and wisdom. Desire can become creativity. Every dark emotion, when acknowledged, can be reshaped into strength. Step 3. Expression without destruction to integrate the shadow. You must learn to express it in ways that do not destroy you or others. This might mean writing in a journal, without censorship, pouring out the words you would never dare to speak aloud. It might mean painting, composing, or dancing the emotions you've hidden. It might mean talking to a therapist, a trusted friend, or even imagining a dialogue with your shadow itself. Jung encouraged his patients to personify the shadow, to close their eyes and picture it, to ask it questions, to listen to what it wants. Often, what emerged was not a monster, but a wounded child, a neglected part of the self that longed to be acknowledged. This act of dialogue is powerful. Instead of fearing the shadow, you begin to understand it. You see that it is not there to destroy you, to remind you of the parts of yourself you abandoned. Step 4. Integration. Integration means weaving the shadow into your conscious identity. This does not mean indulging every impulse. It means owning them. It means saying, yes, I am capable of anger. Yes, I have desires. Yes, I sometimes envy. Yes, I am not perfect. And all of this is me. Once you own the shadow, it stops owning. You no longer project your buried traits onto others because you recognize them in yourself. You no longer sabotage yourself unconsciously because you understand your fears. You no longer repeat toxic cycles blindly because you see the patterns for what they are. Integration is the art of becoming whole. You are no longer a mask with missing pieces. You are complete. With both light and dark, acknowledge the power of the shadow. Here lies the paradox. The very qualities you rejected hold immense power. Repressed anger can become courage and boundary setting. Suppressed desire can fuel art, innovation, and ambition. Buried fear can sharpen wisdom and foresight. Even shame, when faced, becomes compassion for yourself and for others. By integrating the shadow, you don't erase darkness. You transform it. You turn poison into medicine, weakness into strength, wounds into wisdom. Why so few succeed if integration is so powerful, why do so few attempt it? Because it is uncomfortable. It demands brutal honesty. It demands admitting that much of what has gone wrong in your life was not fate, not bad luck, not other people, it was you. Not consciously, not maliciously, but unconsciously. Most people prefer the comfort of illusion. It is easier to blame others than to face the truth. It is easier to call yourself unlucky than to admit you sabotaged yourself. It is easier to maintain the mask of goodness than to acknowledge the anger, envy, and desire hidden beneath. But illusions, no matter how comfortable, keep you trapped. Denial feels safe, but it is a prison. Only honesty, however painful, brings freedom. The continuous journey integrating the shadow is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process. The shadow is vast, layered, and cunning. Each time you believe you've conquered it, it reveals another face. Integration is not about final victory. It is about ongoing relationship. You learn to live with the shadow, to recognize its whispers, to catch its projections, to transform its impulses. The goal is not perfection. The goal is wholeness. The light in the darkness, there is a strange beauty in this journey. The very darkness you feared becomes the path to light. The very pain you avoided becomes the source of wisdom. The shadow, once an enemy, becomes an ally. And when you integrate it, you begin to feel different. You feel less fragile because you no longer fear being exposed. You feel more authentic because you no longer hide parts of yourself. You feel stronger because your energy is no longer wasted in repression. This is the gift of the shadow. It shows you that the only way out is through. The final question now, the question is not whether you have a shadow, you do. The question is not whether it controls you, it already does. The question is, will you face it? Will you allow it? Will you integrate it? And in doing so, unlock the wholeness that has always been yours. Because the alternative is clear. If you refuse, the shadow will continue to sabotage, to project, to erupt, to hollow you out. But if you choose courage, the shadow will stop being a chain and start being a key. And in that moment, you will no longer be a prisoner of the unconscious. You will be free.